game is they know all the X's and O's. I'm sure you've gone through everything a million times. With that, where do you kind of see your role tonight in a game like this, kind of helping the guys weather the storm and get through this?
Well, the biggest part of it is built over years, right? It's built over time. So the X's and O's part, you're as dialed as you're going to be on that. We'll go through it, the basics of it. And that is to set a tone and a mood that allows them to play with a certain amount of freedom in that game, that you encourage that in the style that we play, in the hockey that we play, it's not so much you're encouraging the hero mentality, because I don't really think one guy trying to go coast to coast on our group helps us very much, but certainly embracing the opportunity to make the hard, great plays.
Right side, first row.
Paul, first off, any lineup changes?
Yeah, Kyle Okposo comes back in for Nick Cousins.
And then Vlad Tarasenko, he's played in a Game 7
Yeah.
Cup Final. Just how much does you guys having a guy who has that experience, how much do you think that can help in the room, and just what he's brought to you guys since you acquired him? How much value has he brought?
Yeah, that's been a really great experience on my part. I didn't know Vlad as a person before he comes here. The experience of that Game 7 you see long before you get to it. And I love what he's done with, it was true with Barkov and Reinhart as well, but with Luosterainen and Lundell, still in some ways young, but I think Lundy's closing in on 50 playoff games already, or maybe closing in on 60. What he's done for them in terms of communicating on the ice, on the bench, talking hockey, relaying experiences. And there is a lot of experience because he's played against certain styles. He's played in the West, now he's played in the East. So he can talk about when we played this team, they did the same thing the Edmonton doing. Let's do this. And there's all of the best coaching doesn't happen from coaches to players. It happens player to player on the bench. The mentorship that happens on the bench, that's really where the nuances of the game are passed down. I think that's why you have organizations so often, when you think of whatever it was, Detroit went 24 straight years of making the playoffs, whatever that number is. There's a mentorship that happened with all of those great players. I think there were, I think 11 Hall of Fame players on the team that beat us in 2002. And then these young players start coming in, the Dassuts and the Zetterbergs and all that. And that's where they learned the game. That's what Vlad's been great, because he's very communicative. He's very open with the players, and he talks hockey all day long.
Left side, second row, Greg.
Paul, before Game 6, you told us that you felt the pressure was evening out in the series, and I was wondering if we can get a check of the Paul Maurice pressure-o-meter ahead of Game 7.
I think sevens are just a completely unique animal. I don't think it relates in terms of pressure to anything, because there is no tomorrow. So it's a completely different feel. I think we've been immersed in the weight of it for a week. We've been through 2 or 3 games, so there's not a new experience for us in this, other than it's also a Game 7. I think both teams come out flat out as fast as they possibly can. I think that's going to be the manifestation of all of this. As much as they love interacting with you people, as often as we have been afforded the opportunity over the last, they can just drop the puck and play hockey, and that will be a nice thing for them.
Back right.
Along those lines, I wanted to ask something very relevant to today. What was the process like when you got drafted?
I was not at the draft, on advice of my advisor, sage advice at that. My mom called me. I was at a friend's house. There were probably 8 or 9 people, and it had never crossed my mind that the draft was that day. It wasn't a part of my life. And my mom called me, I think, at about 11:15, and I was on my way home, of course, to tell me I got drafted. How the fuck did that happen? And then I know it's not in the first round, because it's 11:15. And then I said, who drafted me? And she said, Philadelphia. But then the math kicked in, because I knew where they were drafted, and I thought, that's 252. And she said, yep. So that was it. So then we didn't go home. We were going to a bar, and I had to do everything last. I got into the cab last. I got the last beer, and I had to pick up the check because I was last. Friends, close friends.
Left side, fourth row, Sean.
Paul, back to your first
Back to the 40 years later.
your first answer and talking about the mentality, not the hero mentality you were saying, but the mentality you're trying to get with these players. I wonder, over the course of these last 3 games, as you've been trying to, get them to close this out, has that, like, I know your X's and O's are locked in over the years. Does that change much? The buttons that you push,
No.
the things you've done from game to game?
The idea of the non-hero, I'm not trying to get out of that. What you don't want is somebody trying to break a game open at a place in the game that it can't be broken open. So you don't want that mentality. Instead of hitting the guy who's 5 feet away from me, I'm going to try to hit the guy that shouldn't be, but he's 25 feet away from me through 7 sticks. So not more, right? That's the mentality. I will say again, like, I understand why we lost the last 3 games. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. But I really, really liked our game 5, right? In terms of 5-on-5 play, that was by far our best game. And so we're not far off that. There's not major adjustments to the games. We've fooled around with some things and tweaked some things over the last couple of days. Some of it would be a return to form a little bit. There were some new things, but nothing they hadn't seen this year at some point. So we don't want the feeling that you need to do so much more in a Game 7 than you haven't done at any point over our last 2 months or our last 2 years. We want to constantly try to, play to your identity is very, very important. But we also want a freedom that comes with that we don't be so strict with what we do, that we don't have the Barkov goal, the inside play, beat a guy one-on-one, beat a goalie. These players are capable of that on both sides, and it's really important. My job is not to restrict them.
We'll take 2 more questions for Coach. Left side, second row.
Yeah, Paul, it's a two-parter, but they're kind of linked. Why Kyle Okposo in for Nick Cousins? But the other part is, it's a decision you have to make in a Game 7. You've got experience in Game 7s. How does your experience help you in this particular Game 7? If you could answer the Okposo and sort of how the experience helps you.
Well, you know what? It was solely hockey-based, but a difficult thing to do to a man, to take a Game 7 from him, certainly in the final. This is such a rare thing, and Nick is so incredibly loved by his teammates. I just felt that looking back at the 3 previous games our team played, I liked the 3 games that Kyle's had played slightly better than Nick's. And that's it. It wasn't bad. There wasn't an obvious mistake. There wasn't a reason. I just felt. And there's other options then with Kyle in terms of how we come off the bench in certain situations, just something like that. So the hockey part, I didn't agonize over. Having to tell somebody that's played here for 2 years, and he's so loved by his teammates. And I also factored that in too, but because we've had them in and out of the lineup, it became a non-factor. It was a hard thing to do. We handled it incredibly well. Team first. Good luck, whatever you guys need. And that's why his teammates love him.
One more question, front right.
Most importantly, how caffeinated do you anticipate being by puck drop tonight?
There's no need. 1 this morning. There'll be 1 right around 6 o'clock, and that'll be it.
And then my actual question is, this group you mentioned yesterday, the core group's played, I think, 210 games almost over the last 2 years together. Barkov, Reinhart, Bob, Ekblad, the list goes on. Just how important are they to this franchise as a whole?
They are the fabric, they are the core, and they are the identity of it. Their personalities are the room. The distance this franchise has covered over 3 or 4 years is based on the distance their games have covered, the leadership that they have shown and then grown into. They are the reason that we're here. And I think they're going to be great tonight.